never until that point thought I could leave engineering. I don't have to be an engineer. And I was like, oh.
What would you do if you had nothing to fear? What would you change if you had nothing to lose? What would you pursue if you didn't care what anyone else thought of you? Welcome to the Have You Seen Me Now podcast. I'm your host, Sherilyn. Have you seen me now? Have you seen me now? Greetings, stellar rock stars. Welcome to episode 6 of the Have You Seen Me Now podcast. You guys, it's been a while. It's been a hot minute. Life has just had a few curveballs these last few months. I can't believe, I think the last episode dropped. Episode 5 dropped on March 7th. And you guys, it's June tomorrow. Where did these last few months go? Well, forgive me for neglecting you and for being gone so long. I've missed you. I'm so glad that you're back. I'm glad to be back myself. And that kind of feels like there's even more to that statement. Like, I'm glad to be back. In fact, I think I'd seen a meme that was like, welcome back. It's okay. You just forgot who you were for a little while. And I feel like that's kind of the space I've been living in. Can anyone else relate out there? You know, when you have a plan, or you set out to do one thing and then curveballs come. So I've been going through some transitions in life, in my career, in my job. My dad went through a couple surgeries, flew out to Georgia and back. It was so good to be able to see family face to face. This pandemic year has definitely taken a toll on all of us, right? And I think I'm still kind of like spinning out after this wild year and things that have come and gone. And so I'm still kind of catching my breath, but I've really been having fun doing these podcast episodes, really have been enjoying having these conversations. And I have to say that the conversations that I've had, in the first 5 episodes were so impactful to me personally. There were so many times that I would think back on those conversations and those little gold nuggets that my guests had shared honestly became teaching tools for me and lessons for me and have been reminders to myself in the midst of, when the universe just like throws stuff at you to derail you, discourage you, depression sets in, you start to compare yourselves to others. I definitely have been fighting, all of those negative thought patterns that love to creep in. And, just like I'm sure many of you out there, the struggle is real to believe that you have a voice that is unique, that you have something to say. For me as an artist and as a songwriter, that I have something to sing that's worth offering, that I have a gift worth offering to the world. And so I think I have spent the last couple months through therapy, through time with family, through getting back to journaling again. I kind of had stopped journaling for a while and I'm kind of journaling again. I'm trying to finish a few songs that have been kind of like lagging out there, partially because my schedule was just kind of wonky and, I was switching jobs and switching schedules and getting trained. And, I just feel like every week when I was like, okay, next week, I'll get to it. There would just be something else that would just kind of suck up my bandwidth and my energy. And I just ended up feeling so depleted. And so I just want to encourage any of you out there, if you've been in that space, if you are in that space, if you turn on this podcast today and this is a little bit of like your lifeline to just keep going, I just want to tell you, just keep going. And to be kind to yourself and patient with yourself. I think for me, I'm super goal-oriented, like super goal-oriented. I'm a perfectionist. I was a straight A student. My grade point average when I graduated high school was 4.065. So I made sure I got good grades. I worked really hard for those good grades, and I tried to stand out in the crowd and be the best that I could be and all of those things, right? And I'm realizing that it was really hard for me to lay down putting out another weekly podcast and another weekly podcast and another weekly podcast. I had kind of set this goal for myself to stick to it and to press ahead, but I was kind of coming unraveled at the seams. I was working night and day between my day job and being a musician and trying to create music, and then creating the podcast and doing interviews and trying to get to the gym and cook my meals and just keep up with my own laundry. And I was not doing well. I was not coping well. And I had to just kind of put everything on pause for a minute and catch my breath and kind of recenter my soul and remind myself what really matters and remind myself what I love. You guys seen that movie? I think it's The Runaway Bride, when she's like, I don't even know what kind of eggs I like. And I feel like maybe I've been a little bit in that space of figuring out, what kind of darn eggs do I like? What kind of things in my life do I want to pursue? What do I want my everyday life to look like? What kind of life makes me want to wake up in the morning? And I feel like I've been fighting really hard this last year to create a new life for myself that I actually want to wake up for in the morning, because I hadn't been living in that space. And that's where I want to be for this year ahead. So I hope you'll come with me for the adventure. And that leads me to my guest on this week's episode. She has become a dear friend of mine, especially through the pandemic and this wild last year we've all had. Sarah D'Orlando is an author, speaker, and life coach with a desire to help others be set free to be who they're created to be. She's married to her college sweetheart, Andres, and they have one super cute daughter. In her downtime, you can find her hiking her favorite trails here in San Luis Obispo, California. We often do that together. Or strolling the beaches in search of the perfect sea glass. Her debut memoir, Love Letters from Poland, released on March 21st. We actually sat down to have this conversation you're about to hear right before the book came out. And it was such an exciting time to connect with Sarah as she was heading into a whole new season. And she had just stepped out of her job in structural engineering to pursue her dreams. I encourage you to grab a copy of her new book, and she's offering free shipping to Have You Seen Me Now listeners with the discount code Sherilyn at checkout. So check out the show notes for all the details on that. But stick around, especially if you have a dream in your heart, but have been struggling to overcome the fear to take steps in a whole new direction in your life. Because I really believe Sarah's story is going to offer you some incredible encouragement and inspiration today. Welcome back, you guys. I am so excited to have my dear friend Sarah D'Orlando in the house today.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me, Sherilyn.
I am so stoked. And it's awesome. Sarah lives here in the area in San Luis Obispo. So we get to be socially distanced in the studio today, which is awesome.
Yes.
I love being actually in space with somebody. It's really such a gift. So we were talking just before we pressed record about how we actually met. And I love that you reminded me actually that we were kind of set up by a friend. I had forgotten that.
Yes. We have a mutual friend, sweet girl. And she was like, you need to be friends with Sherilyn. And I was like, okay, she's kind of cool. I don't know if she's in my zone, but then I kind of pursued you you were my date and decided okay, I'm going to talk to her. I'm going to follow her on Instagram and maybe see if we could go for a walk or something. I don't know.
I love it. And that's really kind of how it started. I guess we started going for walks and doing coffee and sharing our stories and found out our hearts were just, we were soul sisters.
Yes.
Kindred spirits.
Yes. The first time I think we met up for coffee, I was just like ugly crying.
Oh man. I remember those days. Good times. Good times, hard times, but amazing. When I think about where we both were when we first met and then where we both are now, it really is wild, the journey that we've both been walking.
Yeah, and it's really only been a year that we've really connected like souls.
Crazy.
Like I think it was in March of last year that we met right before shutdown and had a workout and really connected.
I feel like I've known you like 7 years, Sarah. It's crazy that it's not been like a year. Wow. Well, you know that here on the Have You Seen Me Now podcast, we have been talking about pursuing your dreams, not being afraid, not caring what other people think, and what are those things deep in your heart that you've always longed to do. And then we've been unpacking this idea of how it started versus how it's going and really exploring these kind of giant pivots that happen in our life and not being afraid to take risks and reinvent ourselves. And I know that you have such an incredible story. And so I'm super excited for the listeners to hear from you today. And so would you just start us off and tell everybody how it started for you?
Gosh. Okay. How did it start? I am a middle child of 5 and I was a peacekeeper. I just tried to kind of be a good girl and not get in trouble, do my homework. And I had a hard childhood, honestly. My parents got separated. There was some abuse that I had endured and just had to rifle through a lot of pain. And that I thought it was just kind of normal. And everybody had to deal with it in their own ways and just be quiet and just kind of move on with life. And so I was just searching for purpose. And I didn't know what was good except for school. I did really well in school. And I was that little teacher's pet, a brown noser. I got straight A's.
I knew we were more alike than I even thought. Yes. I'm that perfectionist gal too. So I totally relate. Yeah.
And it clicked for me. And I loved getting that affirmation. As I was approaching high school, I'd always liked art or other ways to express myself, but it started to get diminished when I realized, okay, I need a plan for getting out of this small town. I grew up in a small town. I had a class of 78 students from my high school. It was like, I got to get out of Dodge. So I was like, okay, engineering, this is going to be good. I'm good with math. I'm good with science. I thought that I was really meant to be an engineer. I had gone to the nerd camp, artificial intelligence, like overnight for 6 weeks, study this program and build robots and visit MIT.
Oh, I love this.
And so I had plans to go to MIT.
Wow.
I had plans to check out Caltech, which I did as a sophomore in high school. Like I was driven and I had ideas about how to get to where I needed to go. And I thought when I arrived to this one place, adulthood with this great career, that I would find happiness, I would find contentment and be okay with myself.
Yeah.
But freshman year of college was the worst year of my life.
Oh, wow.
I didn't get into MIT. God had graciously said no to all of my top picks.
Wow.
And my safety school was the only one that accepted me.
Wow.
Which was still a good school, but I kind of poo-pooed it, but they gave me money. So I was like, okay, this or, stay in New Hampshire. I grew up in New Hampshire. Okay. I went to upstate New York and freshman year, all of the things that I had been running from and the pain and just the bad choices in high school and risky relationships. And, because of all the pain, I'd started to find identity or looking for love in unhealthy relationships. And so freshman year, I had a really bad relationship. He was a jerk and my depression, it peaked and I was on suicide watch.
Wow.
And something had to change. And thankfully, he was there in some of those lows and dragged me to the therapist on campus. And was like, we need help. You need something. And I'm not it. And so I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, I'm ready for something because choosing these other things weren't working. As I had started medication and therapy and started unpacking some of these lies that I had believed for so long, and found healing from those things and forgiveness for others. I didn't really get to a point of forgiveness for myself for a long time. It was probably about 10 years after that until I came to that point.
Really?
But it was a start. And then just a couple months later, honestly, I came back to school, new woman. I had taken the summer and had worked out, and I was doing more nerd camp. I was undergraduate research, and I liked it. I loved my professor and liked the community I got plugged into. So it just seemed like the right path. Yeah. And I ran into this lab guy that was super cute and wanted to borrow this piece of equipment in the lab I was working at. And I was like, yeah, sure, you can borrow it for $5. And he's like, who are you? And he's my husband now. So.
Oh, yes. I didn't know that story. I love that. Oh my God.
And so, yeah, he jokes, I've always been asking him for money. That's not true. But I still had a lot of struggles. I still had a lot of pain and things working through. And I felt like I needed to be somebody else to be liked. I couldn't really share my heart with anybody. Like none of my girlfriends really knew my past and like the abuse and trauma and different things. But I knew something in my heart prompted me to be open with Andres.
Yeah.
Be open with my boyfriend at the time. He was my boyfriend. And he didn't run.
Mom. And
that was new to me. You know, that was the first time that I'd really felt unconditional love, like outside of my mom.
Wow. I love that.
But, you know, unconditional love by mother, sometimes we just dismiss.
Yeah.
But this was different. And I was like, okay, something is good and something's working here in my heart. I just knew that he felt safe.
Yeah.
For me. And we got married 2 years after we started dating. He asked me to marry him on Halloween. And he was not joking. He was not wearing a costume. It was just like, I want to marry you. And like, by the way, I bought the ring today. And I was like, what? Okay, sure. Yeah. And he's like, choose a day in December. And I was like, this December? He's like, yeah, my family's coming. And I was like, what? Like, he had already talked to his mom and they're in Ecuador and they're going to come and fly up for our wedding. So we got married 2 months later.
I love that.
I got married in college. And that was fun. It was really like a sweet moment. And I was still in the engineering path, but I'd always daydreamed when I was in class.
Yeah.
I would get by on grades and I did fine. But it wasn't like, yeah, this is awesome. I had a couple of friends who really engineering like clicked. And I didn't even know at the time that it wasn't clicking for me, like in my core, in my heart. It was that safe path. And so I didn't have a plan B.
Yeah.
Let's see, graduation happened a couple of months after we'd gotten married and we moved to LA. So from upstate New York to Los Angeles.
That's a big move.
And that was a huge move. We were newly married. We had like barely 2 pennies to rub together.
Wow. Had either of you ever lived on the West Coast before?
No.
Okay.
No, it was my dream though since I saw The Parent Trap with Lindsay Lohan.
No way.
Not even joking you. I had a map of California in my bedroom as a little girl. My first email address was CaliforniaGirl at puttyhead.com, which was like some Crayola spinoff. I don't even know.
That's amazing. Oh, wow.
So I had this dream to be a California girl, and I actually, it came to fruition when I was 22, and I was living the dream. And the plan was to go to grad school because I had done all of these undergraduate research programs and I got support to help get my PhD, honestly. Yeah. And I thought that was the path I needed to do. But then I wasn't finding funding for my PhD. And I was like, okay. One of the schools I had wanted to go to said, yeah, sure, you can do it, but it's a $40,000 ticket per year. And it would be a 2-year program. And Andres was like, no, we really can't afford that. And it was a big disappointment, but I knew we would figure something else out. And actually, it was just by grace that it didn't happen, because we would have had even more debt to pay off because of our other school loans and everything just piling up.
Yeah.
So
it was kind of a blessing in disguise.
It really was. It was. So I got to be kind of a stay-at-home wife. I had a great time in LA, but it was really hard on Andres. He had a postdoc at USC, and it just wasn't turning out the way that he had thought. Mm-hmm. The contract ended, and we were kind of like, okay, what's next? I didn't have a job in engineering. I couldn't find one. Mm-hmm. He pursued some connections from grad school, and something came up in Massachusetts. And I was like, okay, go back toward my family. And so we moved, and I started applying for grad schools, because I still was like, okay, I'm going to at least get a graduate degree for engineering. I need to have this. Mm-hmm. So I got into school. It was great. Mm-hmm. Went into Boston, found myself an internship.
Nice.
And just had a lot of things going. Andreas had this new job that required him to travel quite a bit. Things really started to come to a head again with my depression, anxiety, feelings of worthiness, stress, not feeling connected as a couple because our schedules changed. I was probably commuting about 4 hours a day because of going into the city. And then my internship was outside of the city in the opposite direction of where we lived.
Dang, that's crazy.
Since we'd moved from Los Angeles, I had lost the old script for my antidepressants. And I went to a new doctor, and they're like, sure, but you need a psych eval. And I was like, I don't have time for this. I'm in grad school. I'm already going crazy. Like, I can't talk to somebody else about being crazy. What if they really tell me I'm crazy? And they ask me all these probing questions, and I have to open up to somebody. It's like, no, I just want to kind of keep it stuffed in. I told Andres, I'm okay with that. And let's just keep the train moving down the track and not stop, because I think if I stop, I'm going to get derailed.
Wow.
And so I think I have a lot of self-discipline, and I just decided, nope, I'm going to kind of keep on, and it'll be fine. But it wasn't. And I knew if I couldn't have my medication, I had to try something else. Yeah. And so I had grown up in a Christian home, but I kind of was like, no, I don't know if I really believe this. This is really hard. How do I reconcile what has happened with a good God or somebody that loves me, that understands? And it just seemed like a lot of rule following, and I didn't want to live by somebody else's rules.
Yeah, totally.
But for some reason, I was just like, you know what? I want to start opening up the Bible and maybe read a psalm or something this book that's written by this man that had depression and highs and lows and anger and rage and all of these feelings.
Yeah.
And finally, as I think I was 23, 24-year-old, I was like, oh, okay, something clicked that this man that has written these things didn't have it all buttoned up.
Yeah.
And he could just be honest.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, the Psalms in the Bible are some of my favorite things to read for that same reason, Sarah. So another kindred spirit thing. I've always said, David, who wrote all these Psalms, which are really just songs, they were full of lyrics when he was having really bad days. And then there's some where he's having really good days. So it's he's kind of shouting, praises from the rooftops one day. And then he's the next day saying, I feel deserted, abandoned, alone. I need rescue. And I love that we get that picture, like you're saying, of just a human being with faults, failures. I'm totally on the Psalms train. Yes. That's so cool that God used the Psalms in your life in that way.
Yes, literally the Psalms train. I was on the commuter train, and I would just read it. I got a Kindle Bible and just started reading the Psalms. And I don't think I'd ever read those hard ones growing up, or I'd never heard them. These little steps of faith, I would say, gave me this new courage. Yeah. And I would not recommend self-weaning off of medication, but honestly, I did have less anxiety, and I did have manageable depression. I didn't have suicidal thoughts. I was able to communicate and connect with Andres and be able to function in grad school. It just started this new way of thinking. I got through grad school and I got good grades and did well and got my first big girl job. And I was super proud of myself.
Yeah.
I was so happy. I was on fire for the things that I had learned and I was ready to apply.
Yeah.
And so I just dove headfirst into it. And I was a structural engineer for a company that designed water and wastewater treatment plants, which was not the dream job. I mean, it was fun. I loved being outside. I loved connecting with clients and working with my coworkers, being collaborative. And my heart was to get put on a team that would travel overseas and do humanitarian work and help people after earthquakes and do post-earthquake assessments.
Oh, cool.
Things like that were close to my heart.
Yeah.
I've always had a heart to mentor and help others and have compassion. So that was how I felt like I could scratch that itch, that compassion. I was like, okay, I can do this with like a nonprofit engineering, or at least partner with them with this big company that's paying me. But every time I had applied for these roles, they were like, no, you have no experience. You know, I was out of school less than a year, maybe 1 year. And they were looking for people with 5-10 years experience and are, you know, have the right credentials. That's, you know, an engineer with a license. And I didn't have that. So I'm just, okay, well, I went back into the trenches of the waste treatment plant, literally, and just did my work. But then this other opportunity came. And that was kind of the change.
This episode is brought to you by Starboard Stride, a unique boutique production company, record label, podcast service, and singer-songwriters collective based in San Luis Obispo, California. Starboard Stride is focused on writing songs for the TV, ad, and film industry while developing new artists and producing broadcast-quality podcasts. Visit starboardstride.com today and mention the Have You Seen Me Now podcast for 10% off podcast production or artist coaching packages. Visit today's show notes for website and details.
It had started around Christmas time. This project manager came over to talk to my coworker and said, oh, how do you think about working at Poland? And he's like, Poland? No. The guy walks away and I kind of laughed at him and made fun of my coworker. And I was like, you're going to take it? And he's like, absolutely not. And I was like, yeah, who wants to go there? Forget it. But then something in me was like, you need to pursue this. I was like, what? No, like Poland? Really? Okay. And that was in December. And by February, I had my visa, my application, everything in order. The project team selected me. Andres and I had agreed, this was the right choice for us.
That's wild that he was on board. I mean, you know, that's such a big step. Interesting.
Well, I guess one piece that I am missing, though, and as I kind of hinted at before, we had a lot of student loan debt. And when we had totaled up all of our debt and our credit cards, maybe some medical bills, it was $256,000.
Yeah. Wow. That's intense. That's a huge weight to carry. And I think there's so many Americans in the same boat.
Yeah.
It's like coming out of school, student loans alone are so huge. But then when you're drowning in trying to pay off student loans and trying to set up a life. And
we ran the numbers and Andres was like, okay, in 6 years we can pay this off. I was like, 6 years? Like, that's crazy. We're not living on anything. But as we worked, even just together in that 1 year, I realized, okay, we can do this. And so when Poland came up, it was like, oh, you're going to get paid extra? You're going to get these bonuses. You know, I got paid.
Incentive.
There was definitely some incentive to go to Poland. You know, on top of my base salary, I would get paid per diems. And Poland is a very inexpensive country. So I could live off of 10% of my per diem. It was like, I was very frugal, but I was able to save a ton, and that was non-taxed. So I just sent it home to pay off our debt.
That's amazing.
I had decided to go to Poland mostly because of the money. And when I got there,
little did she know.
Little did I know it was going to be so much more.
This is the life-changing part of the story, if y'all haven't gathered.
Yes. In 2016, I boarded the flight to Poland and I just bawled. And I was like, okay, I'm terrified. I'm going to live 8 months away from Andres. I think I'm good enough for this job, but like, what's happening? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And so the first 6 weeks was pretty rough. I would cry very often. I felt like I literally had to get to know everybody in the country. That was very overwhelming.
Yeah. I can relate. I spent 5 months in Brazil and can so relate to that. Like, it was definitely, I was excited, but it was overwhelming. I knew it was going to be a life-changing experience. There's kind of no way for it not to. When you go to a whole other culture on a different side of the globe, and for you being away from your spouse, that's a whole other level too, of you just learning how to function in like almost like in a singleness sort of space that you hadn't been in for a while. And that's a lot.
Yeah. I had never lived alone. Like, I had roommates in college and then I moved in with Andres, and then, we'd been married at that point for about 5 years. Okay. So it was very nerve-wracking to be alone, to be by myself, to, turn off the lights and go to sleep and not be so terrified of the dark, honestly. Yeah. But when I got to Poland, I was like, I am going to go head first. I'm going to dive in and know that the people that I meet, the conversations I have, I'm going to show up and just be present and absorb it. But essentially, I was just thriving in Poland. I found new rhythms of rest. I took Sundays off from work. I walked in the forest. I talked to family. I sometimes read, or we ate long, lingering meals. It was just so life-giving. And I just felt like alive. Yeah. And honestly, my marriage was wonderful because we would talk 2 hours every day. Wow. And since we could only talk, we were able to just share what was on our hearts and really connect and have that closeness. Yeah. So I felt loved by my community, loved by my husband. And I was, finally really feeling loved by God and knowing that he had good plans for me.
Wow. It reminds me so much of my time in Brazil because I, was by myself also, so far away from all my friends and family. I went there and not, only knowing a few people, language barrier for sure, like so many struggles. But when I think back on my time in Brazil, in the moment there, I had, seasons of loneliness and pockets of loneliness and such. But what I remember the most is how close I felt to God. And there would be these nights that it would be super hot, some summer night. And where I was staying kind of in this like brick back house, and there wasn't even screens on the windows. It's just like metal shutters, and so there's no AC, and but it would just be like 103 in the middle of the night, and I'd be roasting. Thankfully, there was a pool, and so I literally would go down to the pool at like 2 a.m. when I was just roasting, and I'd float on my back in the pool. And I would just stare at the stars. And there's so many precious nights that I just remember looking at the stars and knowing that I'm here in Brazil by myself, but I'd never felt closer to God. Somehow I felt like he met me so beautifully in those moments when I was like so dependent on him and knew that I had to lean on him so much. So hearing your story of Poland is taking me back to those Brazilian moments, and I'm kind of reliving it through this story. So I love it.
Yes. Oh, and you're reminding me too of just the connections and things that I had noticed when I was in Poland too. And stars were a really big thing. I was just mesmerized by the constellations, and it was just such a sweet time. Such stillness. But in that stillness, I found a lot of peace. So it was really hard to leave Poland. I tried to extend my trip.
Did you?
Yeah, we did. We did pursue to extend to make it a full year, but the plans fell through.
Yes.
So I had thought that when I had returned from Poland, I would just continue on this high, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was a really hard transition.
I bet that re-entry thing can be brutal sometimes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It was so hard. And I felt a lot of weight from the differences in the culture.
Yeah.
Maybe some of them I was just being very sensitive to.
Sure.
The American rush and just the traffic. We were living in Massachusetts at the time, and it just seemed very busy and noisy and superficial compared to the small community where I could walk to get groceries. Mm-hmm. I walked to church. I didn't walk to work, but I could have, I guess. And I hung out with my friend Katie, that was on base with me every single day, and we would cook dinner and just have community and do life. And I was at home with Andres, but he's not the same as a girlfriend. I know it was good, but it was just very different. Yeah. And so I just cried so much for the loss of what I had.
Yeah.
And I wanted that so badly. And I'd started to believe lies that was the best my life would ever be. And the depression started to creep back.
Yeah.
And I didn't want it, and I fought it, and we tried to push forward. We were pursuing a move to California, to San Luis Obispo. Mm-hmm. And I just was kind of dragging my feet, and I was like, no, if this is going to happen, God is going to have to move some things and make it work, because I don't want to move further away from my beloved Poland. Mm-hmm. There's got to be something. But I practically got a job offer without applying.
Wow.
Here, and then the perfect apartment came up, and they flew me out to come check out the area, and there were just good things after good things kind of piling up in the short course of a few months.
Wow. And it was like undeniable. All arrows were pointing this direction.
Yeah, we need to move here.
Yeah. Because
I came back from Poland in November, and we moved in the end of April.
Okay.
So pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah.
I came here and I was like, I don't know. It's kind of dry. I'm like, who's the community? And I also felt pressure at that point that I needed to perform for work. After Poland, I realized there is friction for engineering for me. I can do things and I can do them well, but I also don't always like to do them.
Yeah.
And I'd always wanted to get approval from my boss and from my mentor, my new job. And they had this fast-paced project, and we were working with high-demand clients. And I did well. I got a good performance review. I got, raises, and they were supportive of me. I got almost no negative feedback ever. They're just like, you're doing great. Just keep it up. Keep it up. And I was like, really? Because I feel like I'm battling self-doubt and lies every single day. Every single day that I kind of have to psych myself up and be like, okay, I can do this. Or okay, I can focus. Then we ended up getting pregnant soon after we had moved. And so I had a really great pregnancy, but still super anxious and working long hours. We were still paying off debt too. Yeah, sure. So I had that goal. I was like, okay, I got to reach my target.
Right.
So we can pay off the debt and we can get done with this. And Annabelle, our daughter, was born in 2018. And I had taken 5 months off when she was born and had some really debilitating season of postpartum depression.
Wow.
Everything was gray. And I couldn't see beyond that day. Yeah. Since college, I hadn't seen a therapist. And by then I decided it is time. I'm done with these things, and I'm going to grow and find healing for a lot of the wounds of my past.
Yeah.
And so I did. And there was a lot of unpacking. And meanwhile, since I had come back from Poland, I had known that I needed to write a story.
Wow.
I knew that I needed to write a book about Poland. And I had known because somebody in Poland literally was like, you need to write a book. Wow. I was like, what? Okay. And he's like, it's going to be about 200 pages. It's going to take you 2 years to write. and I'll help you with distribution. Now, he hasn't helped me with distribution yet, but he's like literally on point. The book was like 224 pages, and it took me just under 2 years to finish.
Amazing.
And so I started to write. What had pulled me finally out of the postpartum depression was remembering all the stories of Poland.
Wow.
And I wrote and wrote and wrote. Mm-hmm. It was easy to write, honestly. Mm-hmm. And that was my respite. And so as I was writing, I was probably 8 months into it. I came across this invitation to have this dream session with a coach. Okay. And I was like, sure, what harm could this be? My coach, Angie, said, you have a big heart as an engineer. I was like, yeah, but engineering's not part of that. Like, how does that fit in? And she said, you have some limiting beliefs about what you can and can't do, and you need to get curious about that. And it sounds like you're going a different path. Never until that point thought I could leave engineering. I don't have to be an engineer. And I was like, oh, what will Andres say?
Right.
He's an engineer. He's the practical one, the rule follower, the planner. And so I was a little scared to go tell him, even though he's always been supportive of the things that I've wanted to do. Yeah. This was my dream. This was a dream that I had, and I really wanted it. And I said, babe, like, I think I want to pursue coaching.
Wow.
And he said, you know what? That makes sense. That's good.
Wow.
Yeah.
That had to have been like so affirming, you know, like having like to not know how he's going to react, and then have again his support. That's so huge when you and your spouse can be like unified in your goals, and that's really special. And
it didn't happen overnight, but knowing that he was like, yes, I see this heart that you have and these skills, and we're going to do this.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And it is amazing. And he was so perceptive and said, you know, you could have the hardest week ever, but when you get together with your ladies, he's like, you come back so energized and filled. And I didn't even realize it. I just knew that I had an awesome time with my ladies, my Beaststead ladies, but I never thought of how that could turn into something else.
Yeah.
To turn into a career.
Wow. So how's it going? So you've made this pivot. You've written a book.
Yes.
Tell us how it's going.
I quit engineering as of last week.
Wow. A little round of applause.
Thank you.
Took the leap.
I took the leap. Yes.
It's exciting.
It was about a year and a half from that first realization that I could leave engineering.
Wow.
But I am stepping in full stride to pursuing my life coaching.
Awesome.
I'm a certified life coach. I published my book. It's coming out.
You guys, she brought me a copy tonight. I have it in hand. It's beautiful. And I, like, you guys all need to check out this book. Make sure you pop into the show notes so you can find out how to get your hands on Love Letters from Poland.
Yes. Yes.
So I know that the listeners are going to want to continue to connect with you, Sarah, and follow your journey and get your book. So tell them how they can connect with you online.
Absolutely. So the best place to go is find me on Instagram, and that's just at Sarah de Orlando, DE, and then Orlando, just like the city. You can send me a DM. And if this is really resonating with a couple of you, especially women, sorry, I only coach women, but if you want to send me a DM, the first couple ladies to reach out, I would love to give you a complimentary dream session and give you the opportunity.
Oh my gosh, you guys, you need to just go snag that right now.
Yes, to step in to these dreams that are on your heart today.
Oh, I love that so much. And I love your heart to coach people. And you guys, Sarah is a friend, but she also has definitely coached me and encouraged me in so many ways, on so many walks, so many texts. So just thank you for how you've been part of my journey and helping me to pursue those things that make me come alive. And I think that's so special. So if you had to identify like an area of kryptonite that maybe you've had to overcome to be able to pursue your dreams? What's some of those things you've had to overcome?
The biggest one is definitely the voice inside my head of that self-doubt. You're not good enough. You can't do it.
Yeah.
For sure. And I've realized that that voice doesn't necessarily ever go away, but I have to do it anyway. I have to say, this desire that's giving me hope is drawing me forward, and that pull is stronger than this fear of saying, stay small, keep on the path, don't upset or disappoint anybody, and not worrying what other people think. Honestly, as I've become this coach and got certified over the last year, I used to keep it really tight to the vest. And I was like, oh my gosh, people are going to think I'm crazy. I'm leaving engineering to go help people. Like, I was kind of diminishing my own skills. And so now I'm fully embracing and saying, you know what? These are good things and I can help people. And so telling myself, like, I am valuable. I can help people with the skill set that I have. And it doesn't have to be what culture says. It doesn't have to be the 9-to-5 job with, these big degrees and licensure. And I think it's so much more valuable too, to connect with people and help transform their lives and help them connect like heart to heart. In engineering, that was a rare conversation, unless like at the water cooler, the couple good coworkers that would dive deep with me, but I never made a client cry in a good way.
Totally. So as we are bringing our time to a close here today, which makes me so sad because this has been so sweet. And I love, like, even though we've known each other and we have had a lot of deep conversations, I found out a lot about you today. And it's been really cool to hear like more of the story. But if you could talk to the Sarah of long ago who was in depression, who was fighting so many of those bad tapes in your head. And if you could talk to that inner critic, you could talk to that Sarah back then, knowing what you know now and where you are and how it's going now, what would you say to encourage someone else who maybe is in that deep, dark spot in their life right now?
Friend, I just want to scoop you up in my arms and say, this is going to be for good. You are growing and being shaped in this hard season. And although you just want to escape and you want to get the short way out, honestly, this is going to leave a mark on your heart that is going to help so many other people. You don't see it right now, but it is going to be beautiful when you stand back and look at like this imagery of the tapestry. When you're looking at it from the backside, it's all knotted and like, what is going on? This doesn't make sense. Sometimes we don't understand why, especially in the midst of it. But when you take that step back, whether it's in 5 years or 1 year or 10 years, you can see those glimpses of how things were woven together, the connections or the people that were there to point you on this path that ultimately is going to lead to good, because I know that there's always a future. There's always a future and there's always hope in our situations, whatever the circumstance.
I love that. I love you and I love your story. I love your heart. Thank you so much, Sarah, for spending time with us on the Have You Seen Me Now podcast.
I love you too, friend.
Well, thanks everyone for listening and spending this time with us today. I'll be talking to you again real soon. But until then, live loud and proud, my friends. Thanks for listening to the Have You Seen Me Now podcast. I'm your host, Sherilyn. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share. You can find my music and all links to social media at haveyouseenmenow.com. Have you seen me